One of the most common entry points to the self help world is the desire to improve one's wealth. From direct financial advice to business ideas, gurus are willing to offer various courses to help you do one specific thing: hustle hard. Their methods can be a little dubious or misleading, but all around, they're pretty tame. They might provide you with some motivational tactics and really get you to envision your goals and ambitions. They will say a lot of vague things to pump you up. But one thing that they omit is some of their extreme habits. Saved for the truly fanatical individuals, they don't talk about certain strategies all that much. At least until they're ready to. And when they do, they go at it hard. Hustle culture is weird and convoluted. It's an extreme corner of the self-help world that sucks you in with cult-like behavior, along with bad and conflicting advice. And the culmination of that is a piece of advice that has entered into the common dialect of regular people: disappear for 6 months. There are several iterations of this with varying time periods, but the most common I see is 6 months. The idea is that when you do this, you use that time to work on yourself. The hustle bros herald this as a strategy to accomplish what would take you 5 years to accomplish, all in that smaller window. It's the sign of peak productivity, an ironclad strategy to getting stuff done. The only problem is that the advice sucks, and taking it literally is even more convoluted. Unfortunately, discussions around this topic boil down to memes. Memes bashing the strategy, and rightly so, but not really talking about it. The only thing I was able to find criticizing and analyzing the strategy was my own post I made in April last year that I based this entire script on. And even then, I was only scratching the surface of this very peculiar strategy. So let's have that discussion. Let's dive deeper into this weird world of hustle culture and why this specific strategy is terrible for you. As someone who likes to work at his own pace, I never really got much into hustle culture hype. I look at people like Elon Musk, who claims to work over 80 hours a week, as someone who has no life at all, despite being one of the richest men in the world. I'm of the mind you don't need to work incredibly hard in order to build a life that you want. This romanticization of work and living for the grind is just hustle culture nonsense that is shoved into people's faces and that people just seem to be buying. However, I know people are serious about it. After all, there are plenty of articles and videos daring people to disappear for an allotted period of time. There are people who have done those things that I've just mentioned, and they've reported their findings as well. And to a lesser extent, I get the idea of valuing working over time. Even beyond that, I tell people a good strategy to have is to have a day job while working on a side hustle. With everything being very expensive and getting more expensive over time, it makes sense that a regular average person feels like they need to be doing more work in order to get ahead. But despite my encouragement to have a side hustle at some point in time, I don't follow the creed of disappearing for 6 months to make all of that happen. My argument against this philosophy is simple. You do not need to do any of that sort of thing to accomplish something big. In fact, Pulling that disappearing act will only make your life worse long term. And here is why.
Oh shit, here we go again.
The first issue that comes from following this advice is the person that is providing this advice in the first place. But before we get to that, we need to understand what it actually means to disappear in hustle culture. I'm of the mind that the term disappear is a mixture of the actual definition and what hustle bros imply through their advice surrounding this. It's about isolating yourself from people around you and using that time to be focusing on yourself. During that time frame, the advice that's offered is things like achieving mental clarity, reading more books, getting fit, boosting your productivity, and building a profitable side hustle that can sustain your life, among many other things.
Ooh, that's good.
These are all promising goals to have for sure, but there's something wrong about the individual providing this advice and suggesting to use this specific method. The first is that these suggestions are vague terms. They don't outline where to be starting or what to do. The second is that they're posting these kinds of things on social media. Now, in addressing the first problem, some defenders of this tactic have mentioned more direct information. Some have provided graphics, and others offer some threads outlining a general strategy to follow. But all of these amount to more buzzwords. Stop watching porn. Stop procrastinating. Have more healthy foods in your diet. Hit the gym. Go for walks. And the list goes on and on. But still, you might need some guidance on how to do those things and how to remain accountable. And already, that's a little bit of a problem with the method that they're suggesting you to use. As I mentioned in that article last year, people might not get the guidance from those individuals at all. They're more focused on being a preacher rather than a teacher. And if they do have the capacity to be a teacher, they'll often slap a price tag on that.
Exactly 1 halfpenny. What?
Or they might direct you to specific courses or guides or articles that they've created. Nevertheless, they're keeping their guidance distant from you. And on the off chance that you actually get some more direct advice and some more specific examples, you will be getting something like this. You don't understand scale. Use $50 to buy 10 tomato plants. In 6 months, you have 250 tomatoes. Plant those into 250 plants. 6 months, you have 6,250 plants. Plant them. 6 months, you have 156K tomatoes. Plant them. 6 months, you have 3.9 million tomatoes. Sell them for $1 each. I mean, sure, Mr. Sweaty Startup Man, you could take the seeds from those tomatoes and grow those into plants. Tomato plants can also last for many years as well, even in winter time, so I don't see much of a problem with that. The only issue I can see is how the fuck does a single individual tend to nearly 4 million tomato plants, let alone have the space necessary to do that?
You idiot. You're honestly an idiot.
And I'm sure in between all of that, there's going to be some hefty costs in watering those plants, buying soil, farming tools, and several greenhouses just to facilitate that. Not to mention huge tracts of land to put said greenhouses on.
Rich has got huge tracts of land.
It's a neat idea in concept, growing some seasonal vegetables all year round and selling them to neighbors or something for dirt cheap. However, in practicality, to become a supposed millionaire from this idea is just terrible and unsustainable. Primarily because if this was at all possible to do, we would have a lot more farmers than we have now. I won't deny that the farming industry is lucrative. In Canada, farmers are projected to make $155,000 in 2023, and probably more this year. However, there are a lot of expenses that are connected to those earnings. One does not simply buy $50 worth of seeds and think they can become a millionaire from that. I'm not a farmer, but I'm pretty confident in that just as much as this hustle bro is confident about his scaling idea. At the end of the day, it's easy to say all of these things rather than to actually do it.
Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it!
And that brings it all back to the second point that I made. That the other problem is that they're giving this advice all on social media. If we're to go back to the general advice that is given for this, one of the cornerstones is to stop procrastinating. This means having the intense focus to do what needs to get done and to avoid distractions at all costs. Well, I hate to break it to you, but social media is a distraction.
Surprise, motherfucker.
It's 2024, and we know how addictive social media actually is. Platforms like X, Facebook, and Instagram all have algorithms that are specifically designed to get us to keep coming back and also to spend more and more time on those platforms in the process too. Maybe that's less of the case with Elon's X these days, but you still get the idea. These are all very common platforms that these individuals subscribe to and that they're posting these various strategies and sharing their own ideas. And so actually following that advice is actually detrimental to their business. Because if we were to literally take their advice and disappear for 6 months, we would not be reading their posts day after day. We wouldn't be indoctrinated in their rhetoric. And this only really hurts the hustle bro who is encouraging this life hack or productivity method. And it's also very damaging because if people did actually take this seriously and did that for 6 months, they might realize partway in that it really sucks to do something like this. That all of the self-reflection and hustling can either result in them being burned out, that they're wasting their time, that they didn't really grow a whole lot, and that they realize that this advice is just outright terrible.
Well, that was a waste of time.
Now, one can argue that social media is a bit of an exception in this case. If you're to build a side hustle, well, it demands that you have an online presence and that you're trying to sell other people stuff and trying to attract people to you. But that is really debatable. As I mentioned before, X by every metric is just terrible for business, and there is continued evidence that other platforms are just simply better in terms of getting people to be interested in what you're posting and selling to people. Because that place is just swarmed with all kinds of bots and has a whole bunch of other issues. Aside from the fact that, again, there's the whole Nazi stuff that Elon is doing and just the absolute absurdity that is Elon Musk.
Jeez.
But even aside from all of that, it is better marketing-wise to be focusing on a very specific platform and not really branching off into a whole bunch of other platforms as some marketing agencies kind of imply or encourage. It's oftentimes better to just focus on growing a specific audience in a very specific place and just growing from there rather than trying to branch off into 6,000 other social media sites. All that I'm really trying to get at here is that it's rather strange that hustle bros would be preaching this kind of thing through this specific medium, and that they're openly encouraging people to just stop listening to them. It's like they're taking a megaphone, going into a public space, and saying, please stop listening to me. And if you're not convinced already with that one particular issue, there's also the fact that isolation just really sucks. And this was a problem that, again, I outlined in that article. Again, with the whole disappearing for 6 months, it means that you're living in isolation. And if there's anything that we have learned from the COVID pandemic, is that isolation really sucks. Or at the very least, seeing the same person over and over and over again for an extended period of time and never seeing anyone else is absolutely maddening, even if this person is a very good friend. Some of us were very mentally stressed out from that whole lockdown stuff. And so to have someone who is openly encouraging you to do that exact same thing for an extended period of time suggests not only is that advice just absolutely terrible and that they're being insensitive, but that they also don't have your best interests in mind when they're telling that advice and freely giving that away. Beyond that, I've reached a point in self-help where this kind of lone wolf sort of strategy is not as effective as it could be when you're working with groups of people. When you have very little in accountability, it's easy to say one thing and do another. One has to be in a very unique situation to be able to self-motivate and to take action in doing things.
Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
In my case, it's working on your mindset and being around other people that really helped me out in just being self-motivating and working and having a routine. A simple rise and grind reminder from your friendly neighborhood hustle bro Mr. Sweaty Startup isn't going to cut it. In the end, the isolation stuff is all just convoluted and weird. You need to stop listening to everyone around you except for this one random person on the internet that has all the wisdom to life and posts about it daily on an addictive website. That is not life advice. That is someone brainwashing you.
But what does that have to do with anything?
No. He's got a point.
Isolation in general just really screws up with our minds. How someone is meant to get mental clarity exclusively through this particular method just absolutely baffles me. And if we're to start a side hustle or get fit, that might mean running into other people as a result. Other people that we might form bonds with. Oh no! But the hustle guy said I can't have friends or people with common interests to me for 6 months. Well, guess I better burn that bridge and keep on grinding. See how dumb that is? Beyond that, isolation has other ramifications long after that period has elapsed. As someone who did isolate themselves when not in school, I found it difficult to branch out and interact with other people. I had a tough time even trusting my own parents and opening up to them about my own problems and what I was thinking at the time. And while I know a lot of people might not have the greatest relationships with their parents, I know mine are pretty open and great parents to have. While this argument is more hypothetical, the fact that a lot of these hustle bros aren't explaining what an actual act of disappearing looks like at its core opens it up for interpretation, and even suggesting a lone wolf sort of mentality, which the strategy seems to suggest, isn't the healthiest way to getting things done and being a better person. But probably the biggest point that I have against this is the sheer fact that the solutions proposed are nothing really that out of the ordinary.
I mean, it's alright, like...
A lot of those things, again, are just not that revolutionary. None of these things require you to have this massive commitment where you need to stop everything else that you're doing and to just focus on this one very specific thing right now. If certain sites are too distracting for you, you get a website blocker that prevents you from visiting those websites in the first place. If you're having trouble focusing, then you can look into various productivity apps. That, or you can learn how to be getting into a better flow state. Maybe start listening to some calming music to help you get into flow state. I know at the very least, there are definitely a lot of lo-fi playlists on YouTube that you can just check out. And I've also seen plenty of people that have day jobs carve out enough time to hit the gym and do so on a regular basis. My point in all of this stuff is that we generally have enough time to do these kinds of things in our day.
To what? Oh, my fearing whiskies! I'm late!
As long as we are setting our minds to it and have better priorities. It's really just a matter of that and kind of just shifting our mindset away from that we have to do this grandiose thing in order to get ahead. For example, I started getting up earlier and going for walks before jumping right into work. I've set up to-do lists to help me focus and stay on top of tasks and figure out what needs to get done. I don't need to be disappearing for 6 months or any allotted time in order to do this sort of stuff. I would completely understand this whole method if the solutions that are being encouraged were somehow very extravagant and required a lot of time and dedication to them. But the only wild idea that I have actually seen is this whole tomato thing, which is completely unsustainable. And even then, if you're taking in that math, that is 2 years that you have to use to become this millionaire tomato farmer. At the end of the day, the only solutions that these hustle bros can actually provide to people are the things that we can just do with our time right now as is for the most part. And that's really my argument. I don't see much of a point in doing any of this kind of thing when slow and incremental changes in our lives are so much better, more effective, and more reliable. Because when we are making a massive change in our lives, such as depriving ourselves of social stimuli, that really affects us. And our body responds to that sort of thing. Our body knows that it's going through a change, and that change can be very, very difficult and very miserable if we're trying to really force ourselves to do that sort of thing. I know all of this stuff because we all have mental resistance to change. And just simply saying, oh, you need to have an open mind doesn't really encourage us to have that. Again, a lot of us can really just say that and kind of subscribe to that, but to actually do something like that is very difficult to do in practice. So no, I'm not going to dare people to disappear for 6 months, 9 months to several years. It's completely unnecessary for us to be doing that. Instead, what I'm going to be encouraging is these small incremental changes that we can make. If there is some part of your life that you are not satisfied with, you don't need to disappear for an extended period of time to fix yourself in that regard. Make some small changes. Set yourself some goals, some reasonable targets, and work towards them. And if you fail, or if you stumble, or you just have them set and you haven't really started doing them, then don't beat yourself up about that. Nurture yourself, comfort yourself, and start or start again. This, I find, is a much better method than drinking any of that hype juice that these hustle bros are offering you. And that's all that I really wanted to be talking about for today. Thank you guys so much for watching the entirety of this video and listening to me ramble on about hustle culture. I am working towards a really big project that is going to be coming out next week. I'm very excited to be sharing that with you, and it would be really great if you guys go and subscribe to this channel so that way you'll get notified when this whole thing drops, and I will be making some community posts leading up to that whole thing, and yeah, I'm just really excited to be sharing that stuff with you. And of course, don't forget to like this video too. Thank you guys so much.